Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to the end of the week. We made it again. We did it. Some technical issues that's going to hold me back for just a couple of minutes, but we'll get started soon. All right. So, hey, welcome back everybody. Last week we had some requests of automation to build around the idea of like using Python to automate the creation of address objects, which are a core foundation within building security policies on firewalls. And so we showed several different examples. One was, I think we ended up showing three. One was just using Python to interact with the XML API on the firewalls themselves. The second approach used the REST API endpoints on the Palo Alto firewalls to manage the config objects. And then the last example, we used Ansible to kind of do all the heavy lifting for us. We don't really have any requests this week, so what we'll do is we'll just kind of continue some of the work that we did around building some Ansible modules and Ansible collections. Now, I got a bone to pick with y'all. It's not your fault, but last week we tried using a Linux virtual machine because my Windows virtual machine had unalived itself. And, well, someone had commented it was fuzzy, but I didn't realize how fuzzy it was until I looked at the replay. And oh my gosh, there's like no way in heck that you guys were able to see any of that. So what I've done today is, hey Cal, hi Cal, hello XY, good to see you. Welcome back. What I've done for this week's session is I've rebuilt another Windows-based VM. And we're going to be using that. Hopefully it comes through just a little bit clearer than it did last week. This will probably be the last session that I do on a Windows machine because I have purchased a new computer that will be here next Wednesday. And so by the time that you watch the stream next week, we'll probably just do a stream on setting up a Mac OS developer environment because that's what I'll be working on from here on out. I think so. We will see. There's a lot of things about the Apple M2 chip that is pretty restrictive. I mean, you can't virtualize x64 based virtual machines or anything along those lines. So we'll run into all kinds of challenges and limitations, but we'll see if it works out better. But for today, again, 4090, No, I'm going to be working off of a Mac Mini, one of the new Mac Minis that came out 2 or 3 months back. So I'll be going back to Mac World. We'll see how fun it is. Anyway, other than that, let's see what we've got going on. So I'm working on a new virtual machine, and I don't know what kind of problems we're going to run into on here. I think I've got everything set up correctly. Let me just check in here, make sure that I'm in the same boat with the M2 chip and VMware Fusion. So, Packet Sniffer, I would love to know, I've got a couple of questions for you. So, regarding your experience, are you able to actually run any virtual machines on the M2 with Fusion? Does Fusion work? Can it run like ARM-based virtual machines at the very least? Even better is if you have any experience using Docker on ARM. I looked at something called UTD. Let's pull that up. And I tested this on my work laptop, so I know that it works. Where are you at? Browser. There we go. Live stream. Let's block. So Mac OS UTD, or I think this is it. Yeah, maybe not. Mac OS M2 virtualization. UTM. That's what it is. There we go. So I have tried this, and it works actually quite well, to be honest with you. They even have like a store where you can choose which different virtual images, and you can download a prepackaged one. It worked quite well, man. It worked quite well. Check this out. Sean Cruz. Let me see this here. Cool. So if you've got experience using this, I'd like to know, or if you've got VMware Fusion working at all. I have a small lab with a Dell T7610, 12 cores and 100 gigs of RAM. Put it together for $400. Whoa, what? How is that possible? Dell T7610. What does that look like? Okay, so it's one of the like the workstations. $400 though. Let's look at what they got here, because I can promise you my Mac Mini was a little bit more expensive than $400. You must have had like some killer eBay deal. Let's see, 1210 iCore. So that's an i5 for $1,100. Yeah, that's not it. So I'm sure you got like just a killer deal. There's a 79 Xeon. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Oh, not so nice. I mean, like for that point, maybe I'm missing something, but like for that point, for that much money, why wouldn't you just get like an actual server? I guess this is technically for a workstation. You got it used from eBay. Yeah, makes sense. I believe it. I do believe it. Okay, so I think I've got this computer set up. We might run into some minor hiccups, but I think, yeah, this is logged in as Panoff. Okay. So let's pull down this collection here and let's get started on it. Where is it? It's the Prisma Access Ansible collection. Yep, that's the one. Let's pull this thing down here. Man, what a deal. $400. Wow. Don't tell my wife. Again, my new computer was a little bit more than that, so not too proud of it. All right, so what I wanted to do today is create an Ansible module that will enable us to perform a commit operation on this device. I'm sorry, not on the device, on the Prisma SASE based solution. You're installing Panorama on Fusion, but due to incompatibility with x86, you took the AWS route. We'll try some ARM-based Fusion and report in the future. Cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, I can't afford the AWS route. I'm just relegated to self-hosting in the meantime. All right, so looking into plugins. So I think I talked about this last time. I might not have, but just to kind of bring everybody back up, we started building some smaller based modules, things like addresses and tags. And this works. This is good. We're quite happy with it. But there was a need to kind of separate an API spec so that we could do some validation as to what people are allowed to enter into the module and what types of things are required and that sort of thing. And so we created this separate file called API spec and located it in the module utilities directory. And that's effectively what you have here. Each one of these static methods inside of this Prisma access spec class object is effectively a Python function that returns a dictionary, which states, again, what can and cannot be entered into the module. So if somebody forgot something that was required, the API spec will catch it. If the user had passed something invalid, maybe selected an option that wasn't valid, then the API spec will catch that. So we separated this because this is 700 lines of code and it's growing. It will continue to grow. We might even grow it today. But I wanted that separate from the actual modules. We also went down this route of taking the authentication and thinking to myself at the same time I'm talking, I shouldn't be doing that. But we separated out the authentication. So previously, inside of every single module, we would have a block of code to handle the authentication, which handles like the OAuth 2 process when talking to the REST API for Prisma Access. And it was ultimately like we were copy and pasting the same lines of code in every single module, which is a no-no when you try to align with the DRY principle of do not repeat yourself. So we split the authentication off into its own separate module here, or its own separate module utility. And now within the modules, we just import that authentication functionality here. So instead of having several lines of code, it effectively goes down to just this one right here, and we're good to go. All right, so we've got a couple of configuration objects related to, like, again, address objects and all the various different types of address objects you can have, things like subnets and or wildcards or FQDNs and all those types of things, and address groups and tags. And then we moved into actually building things like IPsec VPN tunnels. And so that's what we've got. We've got that all working, but we do not have the capability of actually committing the config inside of Prisma. And so we're going to need to do that today. So with that being said, let's try to log in here. And let me hide. I don't trust you guys, and I hope that you don't take it the wrong way. But let's move to this screen right here. Boom, 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 boom. Just going to enter my super secret password here. And password. All right, we are almost there. All right, cool. We are back. So should be successfully authenticated. And let me see. I think I already have some staged config here. I do. So this was around building an IPsec VPN tunnel. If I go to, let's look at the push operation for service connections. This operation is what I want to automate. So I'm thinking we're going to have to pass in some kind of parameter to declare, which portion of Prisma SASE are we trying to actually make configuration changes to? Because it's not to everything, it's just a very specific folder of them. So let's do this instead. Let me look at, what's the best way of doing this? I want to make sure that I don't push a ton of config. I just want to push something really basic, because what I don't want is for a whole lot of, let me just look into things that have changed since we've last committed here. Okay, yeah, I'm going to revert all of this. I don't want to push just a massive change. That would not be conducive to the stream. So I didn't mention this before, but I've got a meeting in about an hour and a half, so we're gonna have a relatively short stream today, which really puts the pressure on me to actually deliver here. While this is reverting, let's go to pan.dev and let's look at some of the documentation. So there we go, developer guide and Prisma access configuration. And here we go. All right. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything related to config on here. Let's see, is it list infrastructure settings? It's not that. Region scheduled. Not good. Oh, wait a minute. Configuration management. List, there we go. Okay, so push the candidate config. This is effectively what we want to automate here. So the API for this is at config versions, candidate, and then push. It's curl. That's a get operation, though. That example is not correct. Because this is a get and the API is clearly stating a post. So that's not correct, or else I'm reading it wrong here. So the response code is going to be a 201 or 400 or 401, which is for unauthorized, and then forbidden resource. And if the request is just really bad, it'll come back and tell us. But I should be including inside of the API spec to look for a status code of 201 to come back. And we have an option of passing a description, and folders is really the only thing that I see here. And here we have the list of possible values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, that's easy enough. Let's see if we can't get this done. Let's see. Oh, let me see if the screen is just a little bit too big for y'all. Let's see here. There we go. That should be a little bit easier to read. So the very first thing I like to do is copy and paste my life away. So I'm going to copy my last built module of service connection. We're just going to rename this to commit.py. I don't know if commit's the right word. What's the actual word? So we use push candidate config, but I know it as a commit operation. What would you guys think of it as? Like, we're actually committing the configuration on the box. What would you call that if you had to name it yourself? Would you call it candidate config push? It's too many words. I think commit is good. Unless you guys have another idea. I'm gonna roll with commit for now. And let's... All right. So let's start updating everything within this copied script here. So commit or staging, you'd call it staging. The way I view the word staging is that it represents like you've got some candidate configuration. You've got some changes that you're staging. but you're not actually pushing it to the firewall itself. That's where like I kind of like the idea of using the word push, because that's what it is in the GUI, but I've never really verbally said push. All right, we'll try push. There are no changes to revert. Okay. I mean, I think you're right, because that is technically what it's called inside of the UI. It says push config. All right. We'll do that. We'll do that. Oh, did my I don't think my config changes were reverted here. Let's come back up to here and say restore. Restore. Oh, it failed. Interesting. All right. Well, maybe we won't restore. Maybe we'll just do it live. Let's see. Revert to last push. Please. There are no changes to revert. But I don't believe that, because if I go to service connections, this is a push. This is a change that I have pushed. All right. We're not going to worry about this because we'll be here all day. So what we will do, we'll go back to the module here and we'll say pushing configuration and Prisma access. Some of these are just basic imports. Again, the API spec we're importing here. We're importing the OAuth session as well. So nothing to really do there. Here are some basic Ansible imports. Nothing to do there. Oh, okay, here's one. We need to look at the API spec or the SDK to see if the commit operation is currently supported. So we'll visit my username here. And let's figure out pan API. I did not write this SDK, but I am consuming it. So let's figure out if it has the commit operation supported inside of it. Going into config here. Actually, let's go back into the init script. So this handles the authentication process. And that's about it. So that just creates an instance of the config. Let's go to management and see if it's in here. So job, config version, load, and push. Okay, so I think this is what we're, yeah, this is, there we go. So this right here, specifically this function, or this method of the config version object is what we're looking for. So this is under pan API config.management. Let's bust out the terminal and let's jump into this and look at it a little bit closer. All right, so poetry shell. Where am I? Oh, I don't have poetry installed. Is that true? I guess it is. This is a new workstation. So let's say poetry install. Knew we'd run into a couple. No, my browser says I've been here before. Hold on. History. Got poetry. Poetry init and poetry shell. And it's not inside of here, so I need to add it into the path. That's why it's missing. Just looking for an example, so stand by. This is effectively telling my computer whenever I load my shell to first look in this directory and find all of the executables. Poetry should be hiding in there. And it's not, because my name is not that, it's this. Okay. Pan office hours. Let's do that. Well, where the heck is poetry? All right, let's go ahead and go through the install. I have no idea where it's at. Which Python 3.8? All right, it looks like I got some work to do. First, I need to install a better version of Python, or a more recent one, I should suppose. All right, that should install Python 3.11, Python 3.11 dash virtual environment, and Python 3.11 dash dev/y. Hey, Mike. Do you have a public Git repository for all the interesting stuff and useful scripts you create every week? Something you can use as a reference or to try, or is to stream the repo. So I've got two places to look. One is my personal, I guess we call it the professional. This is basically my LinkedIn profile. This is where I do all of my public work and some of my private work as well. So this username will get you that. The stream has its own GitHub, or it's called Pan Office Hours. I try to keep the two separate because I try to keep my work life and fun life separate, but sometimes I work on work stuff here, so there is overlap. But most of the stream stuff that we'll do will be found on Pan Office Hours. Just look for the little firewall on fire, and that should do it for you. Oh yeah, we did ServiceNow when we stood up a ServiceNow instance, and tied it into Ansible when we were building some Docker containers. When we were doing the upgrade scripts, that was a couple of weeks back. That was for XY. And XY, did you ever get that solved? I know last week I don't think you had gotten a resolution. Let me know. And this one was from last week, the address object examples. I don't remember doing Panorama, or I'm sorry, Terraform with you all, but I suppose we did do that about a month ago. Did one where we're standing up Proxmox, provisioning the firewall. Oh, it's just kind of like walking back in memory lane. How wonderful. We won't have a dedicated project today because we'll be working out of this repo right here, Prisma Access Ansible collection. All right. So we've got, let's see, which Python 3.11. Great. So we've got a very recent version of Python installed. Let's get poetry on here. I can't believe I don't have this, but it is a new machine and maybe I just forgot. Glad we're doing something relatively small because, again, I do have a hard stop. So it's nice that might be actually able to get this done. Make sure that's in there. Yes, it is. Okay. Again, let me just look. Yep, there's poetry. Okay, cool. Let me restart my Visual Studio Code. Mostly just to, let's save this file right here. Mostly just so that I don't have to worry about whether or not the full shell profile was reloaded. This will kind of mandate it. All right, wrong project. Let's open up this one. Okay. And I want this to be Z shell. So that's not Z shell. Isn't that bash? Or no, that is. No, that is totally bash. What are they doing? All right, there we go. All right, so poetry install. Oh, what is it that you don't like? Ansible requires Python 3.9, so it will not be satisfied for Python 3.8. All right, so the problem here is that poetry, despite the fact that I created it for 3.11, seems to... Oh, wait, no, the current project's requirement. Is this a problem in my poetry file? Python 3.9. Let me delete this lock file. Okay. Yeah, so the problem is with my poetry, it's trying to use the system's default of 3.8. So we can say poetry env, I think list. Okay, which Python 3.11 specifically, all right? Now poetry env use this Python. Okay. So forcing it to use Python 3.11. Let's see if we can't go through the install process. I think it's still cached. Let me say deactivate. I think it actually did create which Python. Remove cache by poetry, virtual ems, and Prisma. Go away. All right, now let's recreate it. Poetry install. There we go. So basically what had happened is that even though I installed poetry with Python 3.11, bro, what's going on here? Why is it forcing itself to use Python 3.8? I might be missing something obvious, so if you guys see anything, let me know. Yep, sure enough. The virtual environment that's being created is for Python 3.8.10, but the executable is running the Python 3.11. I installed Poetry. What did I do wrong? I don't think I did anything wrong. I think that's good. All right. Thinking that I'm gonna have to skip Poetry for now because I've got just over an hour to get this running, and I don't think I want to keep playing with this thing. The lock file I think is fine. Yep, still using 3.8. All right, let's try this one more last time. There we go. There we go. Okay. Poetry install. Painless. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to get the actual Python packages and dependencies all up and running, and that will be nice. Let's go back to our commit script while this is going on. All right, so we looked at the APIs, the SDK, and we found it under panapi.config.management. So that's what we're going to change here. We're going to say Python config.management. Here we go. And we're going to be importing here this method called config version. Right. Wonderful. All right. I'm going to blank out the documentation for now. We're just going to skip on over this because the documentation takes forever. It takes forever. I mean, it's just not a glorious thing to showcase. All right, so let's get into some of the documentation I've already included in some of these, and we'll just make some adjustments as needed. Looks like the Poetry is finished installing. Let's activate our virtual environment. All right, looks like it's activated. We'll use a pip freeze just to validate the packages. And it's got the PanAPI SDK and my custom version of it, so that's good. It's got Ansible, yep. And so it looks like we're ready to go as far as the packages go. So the environment's set up. All right. So this is a main function that contains logic for performing commit, or what do we call it? Candidate configuration pushes. And the Prisma access. There we go. That's fine. That's fine. All right. So here, this is where we're importing our API spec, and we actually haven't created one yet for our commit operations. Let's do that real quick. I'm gonna just kind of insert it here alphabetically. Again, little copy paste, and we're gonna say, oh, what do we call this? We're gonna call this push, right? Or config push. Well, config push. I hate it right now. Maybe it'll grow on me later. So we need to create an API spec for config push. And we're going to have, what are the options again? Let's go to the API spec. And it says the options are description and folders, and that's it. So we're going to remove everything else. I'm going to remove these guys. I'm going to keep the provider because that's also required for us to pass in our authentication. I'm going to, what I'm going to do is state here. State. I don't think I need state because I don't think so. I'm going to remove that. And I'm also going to remove the tag option here. So just like that, fairly simple. Here are the 5 choices I've got today for a folder. And let's just validate that those are the 5 choices that we've got listed here. And they're not. So there's a little bit difference here. So people can add in mobile users, got that one. Remote networks, got that one. Service connections, got that one. Mobile users container. Okay, let's do that. Mobile users container and mobile users explicit proxy. All right, so there's our options. Let's just get this nice and alphabetical. There we go. So the 5 options that are listed in the docs are the 5 options that are listed here. And the description was also an optional one. So let's change that to false. Folder is definitely the required one, and these are required as well. All right, so we got our config push module, or at least the API spec of it. Let's import that here. All right, so this section right here handles the authentication. There's nothing to do for us there because it's already pristine. All right, so create a dictionary representing the configuration settings for a service connection. So representing the candidate configuration push parameters from the playbook. So users are going to pass in these parameters. Again, name is not there. IPsec is not there. Subnets is not there. Really, it's just going to be folder and description. Just make those alphabetical just to make me sleep better at night. Description, folder, and the provider, but I don't want the provider in this object. We're going to call this, we got 17 instances of this. We're going to call this config push and kind of hope that we're not going to run into any problems with that. Let's just go. We don't have any optional parameters, so I can completely omit this entire section. Create an instance. There we go. We'll move on to this one. Create an instance of the service connection class using the service connection dictionary. So in our case, we're going to be creating an instance of the class object called config version. There we go. Let's just place all of those. There we go. And let's run like this. All right, so what we've got is we're importing the config version option or a method into our script here, and we're going to be passing in the parameters for the dictionary called config push, which is effectively just a representation of the description and folder parameters that were described within the playbook. And we're going to call this little doohickey here, we're going to call this candidate config push. So I know a lot of people don't like to have like really long names for their variables or too many words. I get that, but I try to make this as clean as possible. So hopefully that doesn't get us tripped up here. Let me copy this because I forgot to search. There we go. So anytime the word connection is used, I want to replace it with, I hope this doesn't burn me on this. We'll just kind of, we'll willy-nilly this, see what's going on. Oh, wait, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up here. So we don't need to do this check right here because we're not looking at an object like it's got, you know, all these different parameters. We're actually just making the API push itself. So we don't need to do, I feel like we don't need to do this for each and existing. Yeah, I'm going to skip that. Also going to skip out on the state because right now I don't think we need to worry about config state. This is just a commit operation. So we'll go ahead and trim all that fat out. And we're going to trim some of this fat right here. Okay. Wow, this module is looking nice and tiny. I like it. All right, so we're going to say candidate config push, create. We're going to say commit, or I'm sorry, push candidate configuration. And I'm hoping, actually, it's not the create method. What is it? It was the push method right here. All right. So candidate config push, and then passing in the session here. That should do it. It's going to return a job ID. So we probably want to capture that. So that means we're going to need to, do we need to pull in Panda object import? I guess so. I guess we need to import one for job. Yeah. On line 7. Because when we issue this, we're going to get a well, hold on. I don't think I need to. I think it's just going to come back to me in nice. I think the SDK is going to handle that. So I'm not going to worry about that. If the status code is anything other than 201, we're going to fail the module. But if we do get a 201, then we're going to gracefully exit and return the response, which will include the job ID. All right. Wow. Did we just do that quickly? I think we might have. Okay. So, that's pretty easy. Of course, all the documentation needs to be updated, but effectively what we're doing, again, just to walk through this, see if we missed anything. We have an API spec that defines that the module is allowed to pass in an optional description. It must pass in a required folder that's one of these 5 types, and that it also must pass in the provider, which declares your secret information. So that's what the API spec does. We're importing that, and we're declaring it right there. So there's the import. Then we're using the utilities module to get an authenticated session, and we're storing the object as session. And if it fails, then we fail right away. Then we grab the parameters that were passed into the Ansible module themselves, and we create a new dictionary called config push. We're going to strip out things like the provider, and if there was anything else, it would be removed. So the actual config push dictionary is just these 2 objects. And then we create an instance of the config version object that we imported right back up here, which I believe is going to be able to handle the config push. We pass in the dictionary that we created just above there, which has our description and folder. And we create that new instance of an object right here called candidate config push. When you create an instance of this class config version, there's a method called push. We saw that in the SDK, and it requires that we pass in a session. Just to validate, when you create an instance of config version, there's the method of push, And outside of the default self object, it's expecting that you pass in the session object. So that's how we got that information. And if the response is anything other than a status code of 201, then we're going to fail out, and we're going to print to the screen what the error message was. If it was all good, then we're going to exit the module. We're going to tell them that the result, that something changed, and we're going to post the job ID in there. Okay, pretty easy. Let's build a new Ansible playbook to test this out. So we will copy something basic. We'll call it copy tag. We'll call it config push. And we will now reference our module as config underscore push. I'm going to say this is push candidate configuration. Yeah, just push candidate configuration. It's good enough. And let me remove this. Let me clean this up. We don't have a loop. We don't have state. We won't have comments, but we will have a description. Description. Folder is going to be service connections. And the description, we're going to call it test push from Ansible. That should be it. That should be it. Now there's something I need to do in the background. I need to be able to pass in my secret information. So I'm going to change the screen just for a minute here. Let's move to this one. What does it say? Intermission. Wonderful. All right. So while that's doing its thing, let me add in my own super secret stuff here. If you guys can hear any snoring, I promise you it's my dog. It's not me. Test group bars. Yes, that is right. Okay. Group bars, all Prisma. Encrypt. All right, cool. I think that's good enough. All right, so let's give it a shot. Let's see if this works. Ansible, or let's change into my directory or test. So test, and there should be something called config push. Yes, okay. So Ansible playbook, config push, and yeah, let's go. Warning, oh, the vault pass. Okay, I need to pass in my vault password here. Oh, okay. So I got a little bit excited, got a little bit ahead of myself. I forgot that, you know, what just building the Python script isn't enough. You actually need to go an extra step of actually building the collection and then installing it. So this part, let me do something before we actually get this done. Let's go back to the galaxy.yaml file and let's increment this version number. So I'm going to search for all instances of 106, and I'm going to be ready to replace them with 0.1.7. So I don't want to do that in my poetry lock file. I do want to come up into this one to galaxy.yaml. And let's see. Let's also update this. Okay, and the others are okay for now. What I'm effectively doing is I'm making sure that whenever we build these Ansible collections, which is the very next step, that it's going to be properly version controlled and it's not going to write over my previous version. So Ansible Galaxy, I'm going to say, back up just a little bit here. Ansible Galaxy collection build force. All right, so that just created a new zip file based on that version that was in the galaxy.yaml. That's why I wanted to make sure I updated it before I ran this command. And then we're going to install. We're going to say Ansible Galaxy collection install local directory force. The reason why I'm doing force is that if you've already got this same version installed, it will skip. So even if you made a bunch of changes, if your version was the same, then it wouldn't go through with the install. So that's where the force comes through. In our case, that wasn't really necessary because we hadn't installed version 0.1.7 up to this point, but I like to have it in my history so that I can just hit the up arrow and get the job done in the future. Just planting little seeds to make it easier in the future. All right, config push YAML. Let's go. What you got? Okay, yeah. Ask vault pass. All right, so we got an error. The module failed to execute correctly. You'll probably need to set the interpreter. Okay, so Ansible being Ansible. Where is the Ansible config file? There we go. Let me comment out. Actually, let me just hide you guys just for another second. I promise. And I'm going to create a vault file where I'm going to store my vault password in. Okay. Should be good to go now. Hey, it's my face. It's back. Let's hide that thing. Cool. All right. So now I shouldn't be prompted for my password every time. Let's also update the interpreter here. So which Python, and we're going to say this guy. We're going to update him right there. Okay. I'm hoping that's all we need to do. Let's run this back here. Okay. Ansible collection, Python 10. Where is this coming from? Where is that coming from? Where is it getting this? It's getting it here. Okay. Okay, cool. Let's run it now. Let's load that playbook back up. Okay, did not receive a proper response. Invalid request payload. Folders is required and folder is not allowed. Did I get that wrong? Well, it sounds like I got it wrong. But let's look at the API spec. Where is folders? There it is. They were right. I was wrong. So we'll update folder to be folders. I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't like it because everywhere else it's folder. 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 So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to obfuscate this from the user. We're going to use the key of folder, but in the module itself, we'll have it do the folders in the background. And I'll do everything I can to make the product team change their mind on how that should be structured. Okay, so I've updated the module to be folders, but here's the deal. I have to rebuild the Ansible collection and reinstall it. So this is why I said earlier, I like to just have this in my history so that all I need to do is this. Hit the up arrow a couple times. Oh, get into the actual directory of my module. And there we go, rebuild. And then Ansible Galaxy collection install by force. Okay, cool. All right, so let's run this back here. There we go, config push. Change back into the test directory. Folders must be an array. Well, that's okay. That kind of makes sense, and that makes sense why now they're calling it folders, because previously when we were doing just like the config objects themselves, those config objects are nested inside of a specific folder. Where in this case, we're performing a commit operation or a push operation, and you can have one or more folders. So that's why it's a little bit different. Okay. Thinking about that makes sense. So I'll back up on what I had said earlier about kind of masking this. This definitely needs to be folders. And the API spec also needs to change. Folders. And the type also needs to change. It's no longer a type of string. It's now a type of list. And there are elements in this list, which are going to be, what's the right way of doing this? Type equals list. Elements are a dictionary. In my case, elements are going to be a string. So let's go back to the top. Elements are going to be a string. I think that's going to be good. Comma. Got 5 other instances of this, so let's use it as an example. Element, in this case, it was a dictionary. Elements, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to copy this example, and we'll just come back up here and paste it like this. And make sure, again, everything is alphabetically ordered, or else I will lose sleep at night. All right, so folders will be a type list. The elements will be a string, and here are the 5 different elements that you can pick from. Very good, very good. Okay, folders. Very, very simple. And let's update folders, and let's make this into a list. All right. Seems easy enough. Let's go back and rebuild our, oops, into the right directory. Let's rebuild our package and let's reinstall it. And finally, let's go back into the test directory and run this. It's going to work this time, everyone. I just know it. I'm just so overwhelmingly optimistic at this. Okay. Okay, so interesting. So the module failed However, it failed because it says it did not receive the proper response. The response that it got was success equals true, job ID is 20, and the message is commit and push job and queued with job ID 20. So everything by the message tells me that we were good, and we were right to be so confident. However, the module actually failed itself. So that problem is going to have to come back into the logic here. Maybe we didn't get a status code of 201. If the response status code is not equal to 201, this is the message that we got, right? Did not receive proper response. There it is right there. And then here's the blob of text. But the blob of text looked good. I wonder if we got a different status code than 201. It's kind of hard to debug right now because it's kind of already out there. But if we come back into the UI, let's go back into the GUI and see if our commit operation actually went through. Let's look at jobs, and there it is. Test push from Ansible. Sweet. Amazing. We did it. We did it in less than an hour. We created a new module here. Test push from Ansible. So this is going to go, and it's going to go for quite a while because it's building remote IPsec VPN tunnels and doing all kinds of things. I kind of got to let that one just do its thing. Let's try a different part of the configuration. Let's create a address object, or let's do remote networks. All right. We'll create a new address object for a tag. I'm sorry, we're creating a new tag for remote networks, and then we'll push remote networks. I want to let the service connections push continue to run by itself, and we're going to test something else out here. So let's run back to the, first of all, what's the right way of doing this? I think the problem is that we didn't get a 201 back. And I think we got a 200 back. And that would indicate that the docs are incorrect and would need to get updated appropriately. Let's see. Does the SDK reveal anything inside of it? It does not. Maybe it didn't like the... No, this is it. This is definitely it. It's right here. Let's try this from Postman. Oh my gosh, I don't have it installed. I feel like every week we're installing Postman. Every week I'm working from a different computer. Don't care. Just show me how to download, please. Product. Resources. Why are you being difficult? Oh, there we go. Oh, right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra session response. We're going to do it like that. I'm going to check and look at when we get a failure. I want to see what the actual status code is. This is unfortunately one of the better ways of doing this in Ansible. There's another way where you can insert a failure and then just debug it to screen, but yeah, I think this is good enough for us. So let's create a tag object inside of the remote network. Call this Ansible test. It will be the color of red. and no comment. And now we will run our playbook again, but this time target remote networks. And let's see, do we have anything on remote networks that's pending? No, it doesn't look like remote networks really has anything going for it. Perfect. All right, let's run this back and check out the status code. Okay. Commit. Oh, man. We forgot to rebuild and reinstall. Okay. That's going to fail because I'm in the wrong directory. Still didn't give me what I was looking for. Response text. Okay. Oh, hilarious. Mistyped the command. Just trying to be fancy. There we go. Status code of 200. So the docs appeared to be wrong. Okay. No harm done calling out anybody, but this will need to be changed. So let's add that into here. Status code of 200 instead. And let's, again, go back just a bit. Rebuild, reinstall. And now when we come into test and execute, we should get a nice green message or a yellow message to say, you're such a good human being. Look at you. You pushed this config. Maybe not. Maybe the system's mad at me because I'm doing too many simultaneous commits. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Okay, so it works. What are the current jobs? Commit and push, test from Ansible, commit all, There we go. So cool. All right, now the remaining steps are to be a good citizen. And by that, I mean we are going to update some documentation, which again, not very glorious, but first thing that we do is we grab our example.yaml file, which was config push. There we go. And we're going to make this the prime example here. Let's say right there to there. Okay. That looks just about good. There we go. Two spaces. Okay, and two spaces. All right. We're gonna change this to be a more appropriate name. All right, and the API spec documentation. So let's first come up here and say push candidate configuration Prisma. And let's just literally copy that right here. Boom. Now, all of these we can get rid of except for folder and one for description. BGP was a nightmare to model. So there's a lot of baggage. We will keep folder. We will remove BGP. This will become description. And we'll get rid of you. We'll get rid of everything else. All right. Good to go. This is not a type list. It's not. There we go. All right, man. I think we're in a good position. And anything else? Yeah, we need some more documentation. So we'll update this. Let's just copy our latest and copy paste and name this module config push. Prisma access config push. And add that example again. Okay, and the final thing is to just update the data model based on the API spec. So just need to literally grab this method and paste it right below. Yep, that looks good. Good job, everyone. Change log on version 0.1.7. We added configuration push and update that. Push configurations. And let's update the date. This is the 24th. All right, anything else? Let's look at Galaxy here. No, I think this is good. Nothing needs to change there. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. So what we'll do is we will commit this. We're going to say, I guess, yeah, we'll add the new poetry log file, but added module for configuration pushes. And before we commit that, let me create a new branch. We'll call this config_push. And then we will commit our changes. Let me update this Ansible config file. I don't want that to be included. So let me, is it gonna be, yeah, it's gonna mess up things. So let me remove this. Let me add everything and then remove this guy. Anything else to remove? Yeah, remove him too. Don't want him to be a part of the update. There's the example. There's the module. There's this update to the spec. There's the documentation. There's the change log. There's the version update. And here's the updated poetry lock file. So that's good. Oh, okay. So this haven't configured my username yet. So let's do that. So up in Git, I'm going to say git config. I think it's -- global. Yeah. User.name. I'm going to make this match the username for our GitHub, which is Han Office Hours. And the user email is going to be hanofficehours@proton.me. All right, now I can commit my changes. And let's push them up there. All right, so we've updated the Ansible collection here. We should have a new oh, I forked that. It's going to be, yeah. So we've got a new branch called config push. Let's do a real quick review. This, here's the green. These are the things that are new. It looks nice and spiffy. The things that have changed right there. Man, way to go, guys. Y'all just really knocked it out of the park on this one. So we're going to just say create the pull request. And it looks like I need to review this on my host machine. Oh, Bridge Crew. Bridge Crew's logging in. Oh boy, going to do an analysis to tell me whether or not I'm a terrible, terrible developer. Okay. You guys can't see this, but on my host machine, I'm going to perform the review on this. All right, so there we go. We've gone ahead and merged it. And the last thing for me to do is to publish this up into Ansible Galaxy. So in order to do this magic sorcery, I'm going to need to grab my API key for Galaxy on my host. There we go. I'm just gonna have to kind of hide the monitor adjust again just to get this through. All right, that should be good. Oh, there's my face again. Goodbye. Okay, so I've got the variable loaded. Actually, I've got it saved. Let me load it. And the last thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and publish this up into the Ansible Galaxy, and we'll be on our way. I'm gonna have to drop for another meeting anyway, so just wrap up here. Exit. There we go. And we're gonna say, where are we? We're in wrong directory. There we go. So here I've got the file within this directory of the modules. I'm going to say is Ansible-Galaxy collection publish C.65 Prisma access 0.1. Was it 7? Yeah, 0.1.7. API key is going to be Galaxy key, and let's debug. Just kidding. Poetry shell. Run that command back. Publishing error. The collection path does not exist. It's because I forgot. There we go. We're off to the races. Oh, what did it say? Error. Ansible will run this in the future. It didn't like... I've seen this error before. So the publish, I think, went through. Let's check it out. Ansible Galaxy. And we will search for Prisma. And yeah, so 1.7, it did go through. There's something wrong with one of the documentation pages. That's effectively what's going on with this alert. It looks disastrous. It looked like something just completely blew up. But error while parsing block mapping, new line in Unicode, line 3, column 1, did not find the expected key. All right, well, that's fine. I'm not going to sweat it too much. Not going to sweat it. But pretty slick, guys. Pretty slick. We were able to just... Honestly, I didn't think it was going to happen that fast. So I'm kind of impressed that we were able to get this done. But yeah, that's it. I'm going to have to jump for some meetings for the rest of the day. But I want to thank you guys for coming to hang out. Again, if you've got ideas or suggestions, please let me know. We'll line them up for next week's. Honestly, actually, next week's is going to probably be just focusing on getting the Mac developer and environment all set up, doing things like Docker containers and Visual Studio Code installs and that sort of thing. But the week after, I will be traveling. Darn. I'm going to be on the road on the 10th of March, so probably not going to have one that day. But the following one, yeah, it's going to happen. I promise. Until then, guys, thanks again for hanging out. Good to see you all, and we'll